when I start side projects, I think about, what's the point of that? What's the purpose of building that side project? Like I said, I mean, I treat a lot of my side projects as just hobbies. So there's no expectation about building a massive company, a massive startup just around that side project. And it's often like I'm learning a new technique, I'm learning a new piece of software, I'm learning a new language. So I mean, a lot of the projects that you see on my list, a lot of them are there because I wanted to learn Vue.js, for example, or Next.js, or even Ruby on Rails back in the day and things like that. Like I wanted to learn like a new framework, a new language. And so there's no expectation of like making millions of dollars or anything like that.
Welcome to the Undefeated Underdogs podcast, where I unpack and narrate stories of ambitious people who turn obstacles into opportunities. My goal for this podcast is to create a platform to narrate underdog stories and maybe play a small, teeny tiny role in inspiring you. I intend to highlight the underdog mentality and make authentic conversations with people who play the long game, take action with a chip on their shoulder, and convert obstacles into opportunities. Buckle up, as I'll be bringing some authentic founders, VCs, community builders, and content creators who got underestimated their whole lives, and yet they beat all the odds to become insanely successful. Now, today I want to tell you a little bit about our awesome sponsor, Acquire.com. Selling a business is as tough as building a business. As someone who went through this process once, selling my own startup, I know the pain it takes to get to the end zone. This is where our sponsor shines. Imagine this. You're a founder who's built a solid SaaS product, acquired customers, and generating consistent monthly revenue. The problem is, you're not growing for whatever reason. Lack of focus, lack of skill, or just plain lack of interest, and you feel stuck. What should you do? The story I'd like to hear is, you buckled down, somehow reignited the fire, get past yourself and the cliches, and start working on your business rather than just in the business. You start building an audience, move out of your comfort zone to do sales and marketing, and in 6 months, you triple your revenue. The reality isn't as simple. Situations may be different from every founder facing this crossroads, but too many times, the story ends up being one of inaction and stagnation until the business becomes less valuable or worse, worthless. If you find yourself here or your story is likely headed down a similar road, I offer you a third option. Consider selling your business on Acquire.com. Capitalizing on the value of your time is a smart move. Acquire.com is free to list and they've helped hundreds of founders already. Go to try.acquire.com/Sharath and see for yourself if this is the right option for you. Now, let's get into today's episode. 114 projects. I don't know this guy. Where does this guy get the energy, the time, the effort, like everything, the motivation? But those are the number of projects my next guest shipped over time. And he was once an inspiration, and he's still an inspiration to me. He's one of the people who actually helped me get out of the lump, helped me take a leap, and made me become a maker. So I'm stoked, I'm excited. And he was also like a maker of the year awardee winner by Product Hunt. I can talk a lot about this guy, and but without further ado, I want to just have a good conversation about side projects, bringing an idea to life, and everything else in between. Welcome, Mubs. How are you feeling today?
Pretty good, yeah. It's been a long time we've been talking, so it's good to finally be on the podcast as well.
Well, that's a sarcastic one, guys. Because just a fun fact between with you guys, Mubs and I have been working on on a product studio type of a thing. In one of our first projects, we actually shipped 2 projects. One failed. One is kind of taking a slight progress. So he's like my co-founder now. So I'm pumped. I'm excited to work with him because it's been like like life in circle, right? Like the one who inspired me, now I'm kind of collaborating. So I'm feeling stoked every time I talk to you, Mubs, because you have such an amazing potential to bring an idea to life. So let me ask you this right off the bat: 114. It's not one or two, not even 10 or 20. Are you insane? Are you okay? Are you human? Are you robo? Like what's going on? Like how can you ship 114 projects in a span of like what, a decade? But it's
It's a
still
it's
a
a
lot.
little longer than that. Yeah, I think my first one shipped in 2001.
Wow.
But to be fair, 114 is underselling it. There's probably 50 more that didn't make the list
Ooh.
that I published, and that is just side projects too. So there's probably another 100 in that last 20 years where I've had a day job. I worked at an agency, I worked at a bunch of startups, and a lot of those projects aren't listed there. So yeah,
Man.
114 is probably like half of my output for the last 20 years. But yeah, so no, am I crazy? Probably a little bit. I think you have to be to do some of the things that I do,
Right.
but no, but I mean, but for me, doing side projects, shipping stuff in weekends and evenings is my hobby. And so have
Mm.
I spent a lot of time on it? Yeah, but I think people spend a lot of time on their hobbies. And it's okay because it's relaxing and it's fun and it's enjoyable. And so if you enjoy doing something, you do it as often as you can. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's been my attitude to this kind of whole long. And yeah, and it's not always just fun. Like sometimes there's side
Hmm.
projects that turn into real companies. I've helped people. I've helped obviously
Hmm.
ourselves as well. But yeah, there's probably 5 or 6 companies that have and are still running that started as side projects for me
Wow.
and turned into projects and real companies that are still making 20, 30, 40, 50K MRR now, sort of over the years and things like that. So yeah, so it's not insanity, but it is a little bit crazy.
I don't know. So there, if you what you're saying is there are so many uncredited projects that are floating around, which is not added to your portfolio. That is insane. I thought like you've added everything, including because that's what I did on my website. If people go to on my website, I've added the projects I've worked like for people as well as for myself. So so now I feel very bad because I feel minuscule, before you for shipping like so many small projects. So, but it's not a competition, though. But I think honestly, I admire the tenacity and the level of commitment you have. That's the right word. I think you're committed to a project. You ship it, kind of float. Let it go. Decide by people. And I see if you go to Mubs website, and that's a side project too. I worked on .com. It's a side project that helps people to add their side projects as a portfolio site. So I used to like have a website for under me, but if you go to the Mubs website, I think you'll find a lot of projects that are discontinued or scraped. Like there are so many strategies. It's either it's active, it's like bought by someone. So that is something that I kind of want to unpack in this conversation. Is it, a lot of people gets discouraged if some things don't work. On the other side, a lot of people think that they cracked the code if something worked. In your case, you kind of saw the both ends, right? How did you balance like, okay, if something worked, hey, I cracked the code, that high, versus, oh my god, another shitty project, another day, another flop. How did you how did you navigate that highs and lows?
Yeah, before I get into that, I mean, I'm not the first person. Like, if you look at Peter Levels, if you look at Josh Bigford, there's a bunch of people who've listed all the projects that they've worked on, and like they have like a less than 10% success rate. Like, I think that's pretty normal, right? Like, people try lots of different projects and most of them fail, but there's a few that become hits. And for people like Peter Levels, those are really, really successful, and they more than offset all the time that they spend on those other things as well. And I
Right.
think to some degree, that's kind of the attitude that you have to take, even when you're talking about side projects and what might be real project. I guess when I when I start side projects, I think about what's the point of that? What's the purpose of building that side project? Like I said, I mean, I treat a lot of my side projects as just hobbies, so there's no expectation about building a massive company, a massive startup just around that side project. And it's often like I'm learning a new technique, I'm learning a new piece of software, I'm learning a new language. So yeah, so I mean, a lot of the projects that you see on my list, a lot of them are there because I wanted to learn Vue.js, for example, or Next.js, or even Ruby on Rails back in the day and things like that. Like, I wanted to learn like a new framework, a new language. And so there's no expectation of like making millions of dollars or anything like that. And so at the end, if I get to the end of the project and it works and it functions the way that it's supposed to, that's a success, right? Like, there's no expectation of making large sums of money or having millions of people come to the website or anything like that. Now, obviously, that happens occasionally because occasionally you do take a project more seriously, especially when I'm working with other people. Usually, they have an idea that they want to take to market, and they don't know or have the technical skills to make that happen. So often I work with people to build ideas. Yeah, and there we do have, we do have to manage our expectations. Yes, we want the project to succeed. Yes, we want to bring people to the website. Yes, we want to get people paying money, monthly, one time, whatever the sort of that particular site has to offer. And yeah, so it's usually just based around managing your expectations and what your expectations are going in for the purpose of kind of building that project as well. And yeah, and I think ultimately, like, I'm a pretty level-headed person. Like, I don't let big successes go to my head, but then if things fail also, I don't really let them affect me in terms of pulling me down sort of that bad. So kind of on that sort of emotional level, I think I'm pretty even keel as well. Okay.
It's a great answer, Mubs. I like the way you said about level-headed. It's kind of like slightly philosophical too, right? Like, we as founders, makers, builders, we have to have that other side where it's not everything. We don't take everything for granted. We just like take it with a pinch of salt, and we often find fun in the projects we worked on. I think that's the reason I liked your previous answer too. It's like a hobby. It's not something you take it really serious. But at the same time, to your point, some projects take off really well. It's they turn into like probably like career, or even like give you financial freedom and whatnot. So couple of questions. One is, I definitely want to unpack some of the projects you did that went from side projects to actually like a full-time gig for you. But before that, how do you keep yourself calm and composed, or kind of in the zone when people like Peter Levels, Danny Postma, like these folks, they also like they do a lot of projects as well, and some of them take off really well. So how do you handle comparison? Like, what is like your take on uh you know your level to like their level versus, do you have a chart like that, or what is your thought process like?
Um, Not really. I mean, we all have different paths in terms of where life takes us. Like, I've always had, well, up till recently at least, I've always had to do these projects on the side because for the first 10 years that I was in the US, I was on a H-1B visa. And so I couldn't do like a real startup, like because I can't sponsor myself kind of thing. So
Mm,
all of these projects that I did early on they were purely for fun because, but they could never pay me a salary and things like that. So So at the beginning, at least, like there was always this thing. Well, these are all doing. I was making a living. I was earning from my day job. I never really thought about like how do I make money from these projects. Although some of them did make money even early on. The vast majority at the beginning were just kind of advertising kind of based income because that was how everybody made money sort of on the internet at the beginning. But yeah, so I never really compared myself because obviously there's a difference between being all in on something, having 24 hours a day to work on something, and then also sort of, and the sort of path I had to take was, well, I had a job where I had to work 8, 10, 12 hours a day sometimes. And then if I had the energy, if I had the time to work on side projects, then I would work on side projects. And so there's always that separation between like, I mean, if I'd had the sort of opportunity to work on something all in like that, I mean, that's why when I look at what, Tiny and Peter Levels do, it's awesome, right? Like they sit down one morning and, they won't get up for, 24 hours until they've shipped something. And I've done stuff like that in the past in hackathons and things like that too, but it's very cool. But for them, it's like that's their real project, which is going to be something that they sell and they earn money from. And a lot of that stuff for me was like, well, I can't really do that one because I have to work because somebody's paying me a salary. I can't just kind of say I'm going to work on this side project for the next 24 hours. And then also it was like, also there was the expectation of like, well, I can't really quit my job to go work on this thing if it kind of takes off. And so there's that always had me kind of tempered in the background. But even if it was something that was a success, it would take an extraordinary success for it to be something that I could kind of pivot to, because, like I said, just because of the whole sponsorship thing, because of the whole visa situation. So that kind of changed my kind of, how do you compare? Well, you can't compare people in that sense because we're not trying to do the same thing. Yes, to some degree, we're trying to achieve the same output at the end of the day. We're trying to build a side project, we're trying to ship it. But how you're doing it and kind of what your expectations are as well aren't exactly the same. So yeah, so I think in kind of a lot of ways I stopped comparing myself because I knew it wasn't the same thing that we were trying to achieve.
I like that. I like what you said about we fall into a trap where we compare the outputs everybody's going to chase. Ultimately, everybody wants money, everybody wants to get rich, everybody wants to build a startup, everybody wants users. So we compare ourselves because of the output. But I think to your point, it's so interesting what you said. If you compare yourself with inputs, then you will stop comparing with yourself with others, period. Because everybody's inputs are different, right? Like me versus you versus like, Elon Musk versus, so many other people. Some of them are heroes. They have different outputs. Their situation is different. I like that a lot. Do you believe that people can make a living or people can achieve financial success or freedom by working full-time and doing side projects? Do you think, have you ever seen some scenarios like that? Talk to me about it. Like, what's in your experience? What have you thought about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, because it's always funny because everybody says, well, the dream with my side projects is that I'm making six figures and, like I get to the magical 8K MRR, and it's like, I make 100K a year ARR on that stuff. And I look at that, I'm like, well, if I have a job, I'm making 100K MRR more than likely anyway, right? So like, have I really achieved it? Yeah, it's not the same. Like, I don't own that thing. Like, like I don't, but in terms of like what the output is, like we said, what's the output? Well, you've got income of 100K MRR or 100K sort of ARR, outputs are the same. So if we're comparing outputs, then, day one taking a job, I've already achieved that. And so it's hard. I mean, but that's why I think it depends on the lifestyle choice that you want as well, right? Like I think a lot of the reasons that people do side projects so they can get the financial independence, and not necessarily financial independence, because you're always tied to somebody. Somebody's paying you for a service or a product or something like that, versus somebody paying you salary. Somebody's always paying you, so you still have that dependence on somebody else from a revenue standpoint. What I think a lot of people are chasing is more of the freedom and flexibility to work when they want, how they want. And so, but I think, some people are quite happy to go to an office and have people that they work with every day, and they work from 9 to 5, and then they come home, and then they have their own time to do whatever they want. You're working on your own stuff. I know when I get super hyper focused on stuff that I'm working on, it's very hard for me to kind of switch off and stop working. And for some people, that's what they want. They want to be able to do that, and then they want to be able to take a week off and travel, or a month off and travel, or they want to go to Asia and live there for 3 months and work and stuff like that. Like that's so I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of lifestyle that you want to live, more than like how much money you want to make and things like that. And so, I mean, a lot of what I wanted to do, and a lot of the choices that I made along the way was, I chose to work.
Wow, you did remote before remote is a thing.
I did remote before remote was a thing, for sure. But that was like, I wanted to work for this company. I wasn't going to be in the city that they were headquartered in. I told them that, and they were like, well, that's okay, we don't care. And so that turned into a thing, and then it just turned into a lifestyle choice. It was like, I love working from home. I love being able to wake up 5 minutes later, be at the office and be able to work, or wake up and do my own thing for 2 hours and then go to work and not worry about having to travel, be on a train in a car for an hour or two or whatever it was. So it became kind of a lifestyle choice for me. And same when I had kids, it was fantastic to be able to be home and be with the kids when they were home. If I was in an office, I would, not have that same connection that I have with my kids now, I don't think. Would it obviously wouldn't be the same. Would I still have a good relationship with my kids? I hope so. But the kind of relationship I had, because I was there, because I was able to take them to the doctors and be at whatever school function they had and things like that, because I had the flexibility of being able to work from home. That was just a choice that I made a lot earlier than other people had that option. And so I think, a lot of this stuff has to do with like making a choice about how you want to live your life. And I think a lot of people are like, I think a lot of people are making that choice now with the whole, like, with the remote work, with the nomad lifestyle and things like that. It's more about how you want to live your life rather than I want financial independence.
Right.
I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I think a lot. So one of the things I want to also talk about, which you kind of briefly touched, choices, decision making. You made a lot of choices, in this last 10 years, 15 years of your career. And talk to me about your decision making process, like how fast you move. Do you have like a framework you follow? Especially for founders or like makers who are just getting started, they want to build side projects as well.
I don't think there's one framework that works for everybody, and it's absolutely not one that stays the same over time, because the world changes around you. Like like I said, remote is a thing now. It wasn't back when I started. I think you just kind of have to you have to think about what your risk level is in terms of how much risk are you willing to take on. Like, I know I've worked at a lot of startups over the years, and you have to go in with the knowledge that it's going to be a complete failure. That like, just because you work at a startup and you have options at a startup doesn't mean they're going to be worth anything. Just because you work there doesn't mean 6 months later that you're not going to work there, because they might run out of money and things like that. So you have to be very conscious about the sort of what the outlook is in terms of the projects that you're taking, or the companies that you're working for, and the kind of projects that you're working on as well. Because a lot of the stuff I do on the side is building things for other people, but you have to understand, like, how much work is that going to be for me versus how much work is that going to be for the people that I'm working for and with as well. What are they prepared to do in terms of the work, and how does that all fit together? So I mean, I've had, you sit down, you write down, so you just write down lists of like, okay, here's the things that could go well, here's the things that could go badly. And I think you just, like I said, everybody's at a different stage of their career in their life as well. Like, do you have a family to support? Is it just you? Like, I mean, I moved from England to San Francisco because it was just me at the time. Like, I can't imagine doing that now with a wife and, two kids and things like that. But obviously some people still, make that move. It was very easy for me. I moved with 3 suitcases. That was all I had at the time. Now trying to move a house would just be insane, I think.
Yeah, it's. I think the more you get older, you kind of calculate a lot of risk, and the more younger you are, you don't have nothing to lose, right? You have literally you can lose everything and you'll be fine. Like you said, probably you might lose those 2 suitcases. That's it. Let's talk about one of the things, in your experience, you've helped so many founders turn side projects into full-time gigs, and Founderpath is one of them. So talk to me about the whole journey of, hey, this is like a small thing to where you spent like 4 years full-time, earning money, earning a living. So yeah, what was it like to go from, and is that the first one you did, or in your experience, what you did before?
With Founderpath specific, and so like I'm good at like the building stuff, but I'm not so good at the sales and the marketing stuff and things like that. So when I got introduced to Nathan Hacker to talk about some ideas that he had, it seemed like a good fit at that time, because he's very much on the sort of other spectrum of like, he's obviously started companies and runs companies, but he doesn't write code, so he's he comes more on the operational side of things and the sales and marketing side of things. And so so it's always good when you kind of connect with people who kind of have complementary skill sets, I think, rather than too much overlap. Then you're kind of stepping on each other's toes a lot instead. And so what started as I had somebody introduced me to Nathan. We basically built a basically 1 or 2 page site, which basically was called Operation Pi at the time. And we launched it on Product-Hunt. We got like 100 upvotes, and we got a few thousand people come to the website and things like that. It was it was literally, we had 2 conversations on the phone, talked over the idea. I went off 2 weeks later. Here was the functioning application kind of thing. And so we launched that, and it kind of achieved what it was supposed to. So the original idea was trying to understand if we could build metrics around people's subscription revenue. So the whole idea of Operation Pi was to get as many people as we could to connect their Stripe accounts with us, so that we could then we could use code to analyze their subscription history in terms of the customers that they had, how much MRR they were making, what their churn was, what their retention was, all of that all those SaaS metrics. And so the purpose of Operation Pi succeeded in that we got a good number of people to connect their Stripe accounts with us. And then so we were able to then continue the iteration of what eventually became Founderpath. So Founderpath is a company that will it won't lend you, but they do what's called factoring. And so if you have recurring revenue from your customers, but you need like a lump sum up front to be able to go spend on advertising, hiring, whatever it is that you need to run your business, what Founderpath will do is Founderpath will purchase that revenue from you, give you the lump sum, and then you will pay that back over time based on when that revenue comes in. It's not ending in that sense. There's legal reasons why it's not called ending, but it's called manufacturing. But to be able to do it well, like how do you know which company you want to offer that sort of advanced money from? Well, you analyze what their historical revenue looks like, how many customers they have, what's the likelihood that they will keep all those customers. And so you use algorithms and stuff to once people have connected their accounts, you use algorithms to kind of score whether that's a good company to work with or not. And so so that Operation Pi project, which was just done in like weekends and evenings, turned into a regular kind of part-time work for about 6 months. And then after we continued to make improvements to the application and the company and things like that, just in terms of how things operated and stuff, Nathan eventually kind of said, okay, this is working. These ideas that I had, we've kind of proved that they've worked. And at that point, he went out and raised a little bit of money. And after that, I went and I started working there full time. And so what started, it was purely just like a 2-week little thing, turned into a part-time work, then into full-time work.
Interesting. So I feel it's a journey, right? Like it's not something that, that happens overnight. I think that's the key there. You've spent enough time, you've tested ideas, it took some time to like prove that those things work, and then you kind of take a leap. I feel one of the things a lot of people, founders, especially who are starting new, they just kind of impatient for this process to happen. They want quick results, and they get disappointed because it's not getting what they want.
Yeah, the same thing happened with a company called Q. That's QUUU.co. So that was something I started. That's something I worked on with 2 friends now, people I'd never met, still haven't met actually, in England. And so basically Matt and Dan had an idea. This is going back to like 2006, I think 2005 maybe. Actually no, maybe not that long ago, maybe not that far back. I would have to look it up. It's on my work time, but it's been a while.
Somewhere down the line.
It's been but yeah. So basically, we had this idea about, or Matt and Dan had this idea about social media, in terms of people always looking for content to put out on social media, but they don't have the time to go find content to post and things like that. So they basically had this idea of like, well, if you could connect your social media account, if you connect your Twitter account, and you could say, I'm interested in marketing, or I'm interested in sales, what if Q could curate the content for you that you could then post automatically just based on the topics that you're interested in? And so it was the same kind of thing. They came to me with the idea, wasn't quite sure how to build it, wasn't quite sure if it would work, but had some spare time. So I built the little quick MVP for them as well. And again, it took probably 6 months from when I built the MVP. They went out and raised some money, based with the MVP in hand. Kind of here's our initial idea. They had some plans that could continue to add features and functionality, things like that. But yeah, it took like 6 months for them to go from the MVP to something that they went out and raised money for. I worked on that part-time for a little bit, adding features and functionality. Eventually got to the point where it was making enough MRR-wise where they were able to hire somebody to work full-time. Again, I couldn't because of the whole visa situation and stuff like that. But yeah, so there was always, so there was just, but it took time. It probably took a year from when we first talked, for them to hire somebody kind of working full time on it. But they were working on it full time. I was working on it part time. But yeah, so these things do take time. But that's kind of the point of the whole MVP idea, is like, without being able to build the MVP, they wouldn't have been able to go out and raise money, because you don't have anything to show people to kind of show that the idea will actually work. Because at that point, we did start to get some income as well. So showing that people were interested in it as well. And that's, you take that MVP and you continue to add to it afterwards as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I think patience, that's the key. You got to be patient when you're especially if everything is given to you, probably you don't have to be patient, I guess. You can be impatient with the things that that you want to try to achieve. But especially for folks, you and me, we're on the kind of like a similar path. We have full-time jobs. We're still, I'm still struggling with the visa thing. It's so frustrating. And it takes time. I think one of the things I deploy a lot and some things doesn't work the way I want it. It's like, hey, you just gotta give it a try. It's going to take some time. And one of the things I personally just want to add 2 cents of what you said. The way I treat results and patience is it's silly. So I'm 35 years old, but I kind of calculate my age or my experience or the attempts I made since 2018, or not even 2018, 2020, I would say very seriously, because that's when I started to take attempts. So in reality, I'm 4 years old. I mean, in not reality, in kind of startup age, or at least like that measurement, I'm like only 4 years old. So 4 years compared to like people who've invested 10, 20 years, that's different, right? So I would even like encourage people to start measuring their age in terms of what they're doing when they go all in, I would say, because that's where you give it a shot. 24 hours, 365 days, full on, no distractions, you have one thing to do. How would you do that? So that in a way, it's kind of like liberating, because you're giving yourself some self-love, or else you'll go too hard on yourself, which I did many times. My God, it's a journey, right?
No, I mean, I think it's a good attitude, but I think the other way to look at it is that even if you think about your own life, like when was the first time you had a job? Right? Like the first time you had a job was probably, for a lot of people, was when they were in high school or when they
Mm,
graduated from college, right? You didn't get your first job till you were in your 20s in a lot of cases. And that's because there's just a lot that you have to learn before somebody will pay you to kind of do anything. I think to some degree it's the same in the startup world, right? You have to put in the reps, you have to learn the skills that you need to be able to do these things. And so it's okay to say, I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm still learning, because that's life, right? Like it takes a lot of tries, not because it takes a lot of, not because you're not skilled, but because you just haven't learned the skills yet. And for the vast majority of people, the best way to learn the skills is to try to do the thing. You can't learn a lot of these skills just by reading a book. You actually have to do the thing. You have to try it before it works.
mm,
And so yeah, so it's okay to say, yes, I've only been trying this for a year, but I've been trying to learn to do this for the last 20 years, and now I'm making my swing.
mm,
And so I mean, I tell people I've been coding since I was 8 years old, because that's when I started to play with computers at the beginning. That was when we got a computer at home for the first time.
wow.
And I started typing in random bits of code I found in magazines and things like that. That was when I started to learn how to write code. I was 8 years old. I coded through high school. I coded through college. I
Mm,
learned I learned to code, but I started really, really young, and so it was very easy for me. Well, when I actually started my working for a living, so I've been coding for 10 years plus already. It's not like I just picked it up in college at that point, which is, I think, what a lot of people do, is they pick up some skills here and there, and they think, okay, now I'm ready to take the swing. In reality, you've still got a lot of other things you need to learn as well.
yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, that's, like I said, even though I've been doing this for a very long time, there's still a lot of things, especially when it comes to running a business, that don't even necessarily have to do with like building the application and things like that. There's just a lot of things that you have to know around how to structure things and how to operate and things like that, which unless you've been through a really, really early stage startup, you just really aren't even aware of those things.
Yeah.
And so your first attempt, that's why most people fail at the first attempt, because they don't know what they don't know when they try the first thing. It's usually the second time when you've been through all the struggles of the first one that you're like, okay, now I know what things I need, what structures I need to put in place, what things I need to know how to do so I can actually implement them. And so when you do the second one, it's usually it's much more successful at that point.
Yeah, makes sense. Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to like really understand, how do you approach a side project, right? What's your thought process looks like when you hear an idea, or when you get an idea by yourself, or when someone approached with an idea? How do you go from, yeah, this sucks, versus oh my god, why didn't I think about this, versus let's freaking build it, this is awesome, let's just do it, right? Like, so yeah, talk to me about from idea to life, idea to MVP, 0 to 1, that stage. You've been so many times, hundreds of times. What are some things that you've accelerated through that experience that you want to share with us today? And what are the things that you're still learning going from 0 to 1 that are like, okay, this is something I missed, in my hundreds of MVPs shipped?
Yeah. Again, I mean, there's no one answer because it depends on the idea. It depends on the kind of thing you're trying to do, and that comes through, just having been through a lot of these. You kind of realize that there's not one straight line that takes you from start to finish. You end up zigzagging along the way. So I mean, I have two different approaches, and it depends on if it's my idea versus somebody else's idea. If it's my idea, I usually know when I have the idea, like what the scope of it is, what the scale of it is, if I know everything I need to be able to implement it or not, because it's usually something that, usually if it's my idea, it's usually something that it's a pain that I'm feeling while I'm working or even at a hobby or something like that. Like it's something that I'm aware of, like I know what all of the different bits are that are involved. And so if I think about the idea, usually I try and figure out if I can build it in a short amount of time or not. That's usually my signal of whether it's something to move forward with or not. Because just because it's with these MVPs, you don't want them like dragging on. Like you don't want to take 6 months to build something. You want to build it in ideally less than a month. Ideally in 2 weeks is the window that I put on stuff. It's let's build the MVP in 2 weeks, and that doesn't mean it has to be like fully finished and all spit and polished and all that kind of stuff. But like finished to the point where I can put it on a server and show it to a close friend and say, look, I built this, it works. Kind of, what do you think? Kind of thing. And so if I'm working on my own ideas, like I said, I kind of have already a sense of whether that's something that is achievable based on what features I can cut, things like that. If I'm working on somebody else's idea, that gets a little bit trickier because often it will be in a industry, in a topic, or something that I don't know particularly well. And so you do have to do some research there in terms of like, okay, what do I not know about this? Like, why is this thing, why is this a problem that you should solve? Or what are the things that I'm not aware of right now that will make working on this kind of hard or make it easy, hopefully. But like, what are the things that I don't know? So I used to tell people, it's funny, like when I worked on projects, I'd say to them, it's going to take me a month to build this thing, but I'm not going to write any code for the first 2 weeks. They're like, well, Mubs, you write code. What are you doing for the first 2 weeks here that you're not going to be writing code? Like, I need to learn about the industry. I need to learn about the things about what the software is supposed to do. I need to take time to research all this stuff so that when I start to write code, I know what I'm supposed to write. And I think for me that solves a lot of problems, because often if you just kind of jump in and just start to write code because you think, well, I know how to write code, I'm just going to write code. Then you run into the problem eventually, because eventually you will run into the problem, and then you, in some cases, you have to like scrap it and start over because of the thing that you hit. And so if you actually take the time to learn about, you know, what the thing is that you're trying to build and how it integrates with everything else and everything like that, it does help you get a sense of, one, if it's a good idea, if it's possible, how hard is it going to be, how long is it going to take, and then you take all those inputs and say, well, if I know that, if I know all these things, is it even worth trying to do it? Is it worth trying to build this thing because I know it's going to be hard, or I know it's going to be easy, but how big is the industry? How big is the market? And you know, you've taken the time to kind of learn all those things in terms of how do you, you know, where did the potential users hang out and things like that. So you take the time to kind of evaluate all of that stuff, and then you kind of make the estimation of like, okay, is this worth it or not?
Interesting. A lot of back and forth, I would say, right? Like, you know, it's like a lot of swings in baseball terms.
Yeah.
One of the things he said really that caught my attention just now. Let me think. Let me frame this question in the right way. When you work on yourselves, meaning your own side projects, right? You accelerate fast versus you work on other people's side project. You know, you take some time to do research and whatnot. Do you recommend? Yeah. Do you recommend people to only build projects around where they have skin in the game, or what is your take on like things? Okay, say for example, out of the box, I don't know. Let's, for example, you're not a Web3 guy. You're completely into like, you know, SaaS and, you know, other things. And someone approached with a very interesting idea, very novel, in a space that you're not part of. Would you still consider it? Would you recommend other people to like explore? What is your take on, you know, having skin in the game?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. I think that goes back to like, what's your expectations for the project if you're going to take it on? Like, if somebody came to me with I mean, obviously I know Web3 a little bit now, but you
Yeah.
know, back in the day, somebody came to me with a Web3 project, it's like, well, this is something I want to learn more about. Like, I don't know a lot about Web3, and I want to learn about Web3. And
Right.
so if you go in with that expectation of like, okay, it's going to take me a little bit longer to kind of work on this thing because I don't know the technology, I don't know the industry, I don't know the players, you know, I don't know how to structure stuff here. It's going to take me more than the 2 weeks it would normally take me to build one of these things. But that's okay because I'm learning something for the future as well. And it might be a complete flop because obviously I don't know
Yeah.
the industry that well. I don't know what's going to work in this space, but I'm building the skill set so that when the next time somebody comes to me with an idea in the Web3 space, I'll be able to evaluate that a lot more quickly and say whether it's something I want to work on or not. And so, yeah, so I think so with a lot of these things, it's your personal choice, right? If somebody comes to you with a Web3 project, you're like, I hate Web3. It's a stupid idea. What the heck is this Bitcoin thing? Yeah, it's a complete scam. You know, whatever. Then you stay away from it. Personally, I don't think any of those things. I think Web3 is awesome. I think, you know, owning your own keys and being able to put things on the chain and it be yours is fantastic. You know, whether the technology is going to, you know, integrate into society in the future, we have no
Right.
idea. Like, I mean, that was the same thing that happened with the internet. You know, like, it was a great technology. It's a great idea. Is everybody on the planet going to be connected to the internet and have access to the web and do e-commerce online and stuff like that? That's a societal shift that had to happen. People had to make that choice to get online. I think it's to some degree it's the same with Web3. Like, do you trust the blockchain, or do you still want some other third party to be able to, you know, have a say or have influence on you know, the sort of ways that we do things in the future or not? And that's just something that I don't know that we know the answer to that yet. I don't think it's going to happen as fast as the move onto the internet happened.
Right.
But it's potentially, again, kind of a sea change in terms of how this stuff works.
Yeah. Speaking about technology, we have to talk about AI. You and I have been jamming on a couple of AI projects, you know, in the last 6, 7 months, 8 months. talk to me about like the shifts you're observing. What are some things that you're really excited about? Be it like generative AI versus general AI. What is keeping you like, okay, I have to learn this. It's really interesting. Sometime I want to build in this space. Like how you build like previous projects. Like talk to me about your take on the rise of the AI wave.
Yeah, I think AI it's not anything new. People have been trying this for a long time. It's getting better and better as hardware's improving too. Like the speed of things is improving. So a lot of things that people have wanted to do for years that they couldn't do because the hardware wasn't there to support it is now of available with a lot of the stuff from NVIDIA with their chips and things like that. So I'm not surprised by it. I'm a little bit surprised about how quickly people have adopted it. Like it's kind of amazing to see companies like Microsoft and
Mm,
Apple and Google and things like that, like very big established companies that usually are slow to adopt new technology. They really just said this is the future and we're just going to run with it now. Which is good and bad. Like with new technology, usually the big companies are slower to adopt it, so it gives opportunity for the smaller companies
mm,
to kind of innovate in that space. I don't think that's going to happen here. I think most of the money in the AI space is going to be made by the big
mm-hmm.
companies, which is unfortunate because that's not usually how kind of innovation works. But no, in terms of the actual technologies, I think it's fantastic. I don't see it costing a lot of jobs. Like I know that's a lot of people's concerns is
Yeah.
like, oh, I don't have a job anymore because AI is just going to take my job. I think we're going to see another increase in productivity, just like we did with, the industrial revolution and the personal computer and stuff like that. We didn't replace jobs. We didn't lose people. People had to pick up new skills and they ended up doing new things instead. I think to a large degree, most people will just increase their productivity with AI rather than people just being fired because AI is going to take over entirely.
Mm,
Well, could there be small numbers of people laid off because you don't need 10 people to do that anymore? You only need 8 people to do that now because AI is going to help you. Yeah, I think that could happen. But I think, again, most of those people, I think we still have, at least in the US, at least we have a very low unemployment rate because there's still a lot of work out there.
mm,
And I think AI, will lead to a bunch of new class of work that we haven't even kind of anticipated. There's like prompt engineers now, which didn't
mm,
exist, a few years ago
yeah.
and things like that. So there will be a new class of job, which, some people will move from where they are into those, and then that will leave opportunities for other people as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm not worried too much about AI. Yeah, there's this whole Skynet issue. Like, is AI going to take over the world and we're just going to nuke us? Like, yes, that's Hollywood. I don't think that's happening anytime
Yeah.
soon. But no, I mean, I'm excited because I think, especially for like people like us, creators and makers, I think it does open up some opportunity. Like I said, it is a little bit scary how the larger companies have kind of run into the space,
Mm,
which makes it harder for us to do that. But I think with most things, there's always mm, niches that aren't quite big enough for the Microsofts of the world to
yeah.
care. And so there'll be spaces for us to kind of move into with AI that that software that or things that we wanted to do that would have required tens and hundreds, if not of people manually doing a lot of this stuff that you can now kind of pass off to AI instead. And so again, that's where I think there's just like more opportunity rather than jobs being taken away because there's just a lot of things that you just can't do because of the human manpower that you would need to do a lot of those things. But if you can throw it at AI and it can do it while everybody's sleeping, then that makes all the sense in the world as well.
Right. And I think you saw, yeah, it's fascinating to see bigger players adapting AI so quickly and moving fast. They didn't waste an inch of time compared to 2021, 2022 is like a wave of. I think 2021 is ridiculously good for Web3, crypto and everything, but not many people big players adapted to it that fast. Like Apple didn't do okay, we'll take Bitcoin as a payment, right? Like immediately, or whatever it is. Like we didn't have like a crypto based thing in the back end. You saw in your experience, you saw so many waves. You saw the internet wave, social wave, Web3 wave, now AI wave. What is if you were to pick one, what's the most exciting thing to you compared to okay, I wish, not I wish per se, but this is really fascinating to me.
I mean, to me, the foundation of everything we're seeing is the internet wave, right? Like I know the internet existed since the 1960s, ARPANET and all that kind of fun stuff, but it wasn't opened up to the world till like the early 1990s. And I think a lot of the stuff that we're seeing now, even with the Web3, with the social wave, it wouldn't be possible if the internet wasn't there. Like all of this stuff runs on top of the internet technologies with their protocols and things like that, that if that didn't exist, we wouldn't be able to do all these other things as well. So it's cool to see that and to have been around for the evolution of all of that stuff, for things to be able to leverage that kind of stuff. I mean, I do think it is getting a little bit scary how quickly the next waves come and how quickly they just become like norms now. Like I know with the internet, like I said, it was in internet existed in the 60s, didn't become public till the 90s, didn't really become mainstream till the early 2000s, really didn't become it wasn't everywhere. But like I said, AI now, really it's, again, AI is a little bit different. It's been around since the 80s as well. Like people have been talking about AI for a long time. But like these particular LLMs and these particular tools that are out, these APIs, have really only been out for like a year, maybe 2 years. And they're taking over the world, it feels like. And so the speed of that these waves are appearing and gaining traction is it's cool. It's also kind of scary. It's cool that things aren't taking 20 years anymore. Like,
Right.
even when you look at the iPhone's been around for nearly 20 years now. But it wasn't even though it was very cool in San Francisco circles for the first few years, it wasn't really like mainstream.
Yeah.
It took a long time for it to become mainstream. But you look at AI now and it's like, well, by next year, I think everyone will have it on their iPhones and their Androids and things like that.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's taken like 3-4 years for it to go from like an idea to it being on inside of everybody's hands is that's kind of scary, but also kind of exciting.
We'll see. I don't know. I think I feel like a lot of hopefully with regulations and everything that are in place, hopefully it won't cross the line, I would say. I mean, I don't know. Anything can happen in this world. The world is crazy, out there. Speaking about like these, technologies, I think one of the fascinating things that's happened recently is Once movement, right? You're also building Once tools, like a newsletter, that features tools who are. So just for people context, these days, founders, startups, especially founders of Basecamp, they launched Campfire, which is kind of like a community tool. But the whole concept is you pay for once and you're done for life. They give you everything. You kind of set up for yourself. Yeah. So talk to me about the Once movement. Like, what's happening? Where do you think people startups adapt it fast, or what do you think? Is it a revolution in pricing?
It's funny. It's what's old is new again. Like, because this is how we used to buy software in the past. You used to go to a store and there would be a cardboard box with some CD-ROMs in
Windows
it
95.
and Windows 95 floppy disks back in the day as well. Like, that's how we used to buy software. You used to, Windows 95, and then, you could get all the updates for Windows 95 up to a point, but you would pay for it once essentially, and that's how you use it. Yeah, so I mean, I think there was an interesting trend. Obviously, people didn't want to spend large amounts of money up front to be able to buy software. So this idea of you paying 10, $20 a month, but you pay it forever, is kind of interesting. I mean, obviously with websites and web applications, it meant that you could iterate faster too. Like you could release new features as often as you wanted to, rather than having to build a new version, put it on a CD, send it to somebody. Like the whole iteration cycle kind of changed. And so I think there was, it was an interesting trend just when like the web 2 was becoming a thing, and this whole idea of like building applications online. So this whole like SaaS thing with the recurring revenue model kind of made sense as just how we were building software at the time. And I think obviously it's been a number of years, since we've been in that model. Software's matured now. We know what features we want from a lot of this software. And a lot of software has got to the point where it's like, yes, you can continue to add features to it, but is it features that people actually want? Are you just adding features for the sake of adding features so you can charge people monthly? So it's getting to that point where it's like, yeah, but I want my software to do one thing. I want it to do it well, but it doesn't really need to do everything. And if I just pay for it once, maybe I don't need it to do everything. Right. And so I think that's interesting about the once movement is this idea of like, is software actually ever going to be finished? Like the idea with like SaaS and recurring revenue was that, well, we can continue to add features, continue to iterate, continue to improve it, continue to add features that nobody wants. But now, we get this notion that, well, maybe you can actually just build the software and it's finished. And if we just pay for it once, that's all we need to do. Like, and so that to me is why this kind of software, this shift, I think, is interesting. One, because it's going to cost people a lot less. Like, there's this idea, like with Campfire, you could save like 97% of the cost that you would have had to pay Slack to have these group chat, versus if you just paid Basecamp for the software once and you used it for as long as you wanted to. So if you can save that much money, obviously it depends, right? Like, does it have all the features that you want? Is there going to be some feature down the road that you're missing? And I think there is a slight, I think there is there's a marketing spin to the once movement. Like, it's not that you pay for it once in your lifetime, you pay for that version, right? Like, and I think 37 Signals have said, look, this is version 1 of Campfire. We may in 5 years come out with version 2 of Campfire, and then you'll have to pay a new fee to get Campfire version 2. But I think that's okay, right? Like, because I think you'll still save, 80% of the money that you would have to pay Slack, even if you paid for it once this year and you pay for it again in 5 years. Right. Obviously you still have to pay for hosting, but you're still paying way less for hosting than you would have to pay for Slack to do the hosting and everything like that as well. This idea that we can write software, we don't have to continue to add features just for the sake of adding features, I think is really interesting. And then this idea of like, from a creator standpoint, from a maker standpoint, getting the lumps up front as well, I think is interesting, because right now when you sign up for Slack, you pay, at the beginning at least, you pay, $10, $20 a month for it. Continue to add users, you pay more. But when you buy Campfire, you pay $300 for it. Right. And so the idea that you're getting all of this capital up front for the work that you've already done, I think is interesting as well. Because I think a lot of people are, well, I'm not gonna continue to pay for Campfire. But the whole point is, you can't really compare the two in terms of like, because I've heard some people say, well, the sort of nice thing about SaaS is that you get that recurring revenue every month. You don't have to go find new customers. But if I've got one customer who pays me $300 instead of one customer that pays me $10 every month, that I have to keep them happy every month for 3 years to get the same amount of revenue, I'd much rather have the one customer pay me $300 up front, because I don't have to worry about them canceling in the second month or the third month or the fourth month and things like that too. So I mean, I think it is going to be an interesting shift in terms of what do you ship, how often do you ship it, versus how much money do you make once versus recurring monthly as well. So I think there will be a shift in terms of the maturity and the quality of the products you have to ship, but that you have to ship to get the once income, versus you ship a really quick, fast MVP and you charge a little bit for it monthly instead. So it's not going to work in every industry, but I think there's enough maturity in the software space now that the once movement, I think, is going to be an interesting shift.
Interesting. And also, I think, so many benefits. I feel once is a much more matured LTD, right? In a way,
Yep.
right? Like, it's not new. Limited time deals, lifetime deals are always there,
Yep.
for many years. And even like, Peter levels, the headshots thing they do, it's once and you're done. It's kind of like,
Yep.
you get, if you want one more in a different variation, you just pay for one more,
Yep.
So it's there. But I think these guys, what they did is they added like put a lot of marketing salt on it, and it was like, it felt really good. And
Yeah.
the 90%
Yeah.
cost savings compared to Slack, it's all like kind of well baked into the marketing play.
Yep. Yeah. I think so. AppSumo has been, championing this whole idea of you buying software and you paying for it once. It's been a little bit weird with AppSumo because it's, you're buying hosted software that people have to continue to pay and support and things like that. What I like about the once movement is, in a lot of cases, you get the software to run on your own server and things like that. So there's no ongoing cost for 37 Signals for anybody who's purchased Campfire. And I mean, obviously, there's going to be ongoing costs in terms of, like, they're going to put out new fixes and things like that, but there's no like ongoing server hosting costs or anything like that. No API costs or anything like that. So that's where I think it really, that's where I actually do think there is a good overlap with the AI space. I think there's going to be a lot of software comes out over the next space of the next year where you buy the software, you get an API key from OpenAI or somebody else, and you kind of merge the two on your own hardware, and then you can run it and do whatever you want. Because obviously that's the variable cost right now that, even though, we're kind of running into with Guest Lab and things like that. It's like, yes, how much do we have to pay for the APIs with this OpenAI stuff to do this stuff? And that's a variable cost that we don't know. So you have to limit the usage because you don't know the variable costs. If I can sell you software, you provide the API key. It's up to you how much you want to spend on the API. I don't care. And so, so I think there's going to be this kind of mixture of the AI and the once movement, and like putting your own API kind of with you instead.
That's interesting. I think it's kind of like how no code came into picture as well. Like the first initial wave of no code is building front end on top of Airtable. But the solutions won't provide you Airtable subscription or Google Sheets, like whatever it is, right? We have to purchase a Airtable, subscription, and we just hook into this, and voila, you have like a working. I really like that. I think probably like you and I, we should brainstorm after this about building something that enables that. Last thing, a couple more things. I think it's not, the once moment is not applicable for every solution, right? Like, what is in your take, what industries, or not industries per se, but what areas of solutions that are like, okay, this is perfect. Like, okay, we built this software for you. Do you have any ideas that are like, okay, in near future you want to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you have to think about it from the whole infrastructure side of things, the whole SLA side of things, in terms of like, there will be some industries where you want to be able to just sign up for something and somebody else is going to maintain the hardware and going to run the service for you, because there's just technically, at a certain scale, it just becomes easier to just kind of pass that off to somebody else rather than you trying to hire to be able to run a server and manage the server and scale the services and things like that. So that's where I think the sort of SaaS and the recurring world will continue to kind of operate. Even things like CRMs and things like that, especially where there's a lot of integrations with lots of external services and things like that. It just makes sense for somebody else to integrate that and keep up with the integrations because they're going to change a lot and things like that. So I think there's going to be a lot of that stuff that look, SaaS is not going away. Like, even if you look at like the Basecamp is a 37 signals product, they're going to continue to do SaaS, right? Like, because it makes sense in terms of like the way that service operates and things like that. So so SaaS is not leaving anytime soon. And like I said, there's a certain amount of like, depending on what you're doing feature wise, functionality wise, it doesn't make sense in the once movement, because if you want to continue to iterate and add new features and new functionality, you can't really do that in a once world. But yeah, so in terms of once, I think once is more of a play in the desktop space. I think for some reason there was a shift from like desktop applications that went into the cloud. So even things like Photoshop and the Adobe Suite that were, normally you would pay $300 to buy it, and then it's yours for as long as you want to use it. That they all moved to, now you're paying 20, 30, $40 a month to use Photoshop and Illustrator and things like that, because they're now cloud-based software instead. So I think we're more likely to see a shift where we start seeing applications come back the other way in things in that space. One, you don't iterate as much as fast in like that kind of world in terms of software world. And so I think we're going to see a shift to not anything, but a lot of things that were put on the web as a SaaS product because people just wanted the SaaS recurring revenue for it, not because of the functionality, the way that stuff worked. It was like, even things like Figma are kind of cloud first. I don't know why. Right. They might move back to more into like the desktop world as well. And I know a lot of it has to do with where you're storing the information. In terms of like when you use Google, Sheets and things like that, it's saving the information in your Google Drive, things like that, which you can still do, right? Like, you could, even if you have a desktop application, it doesn't have to write stuff to your local machine. It can still write up into the cloud. You can buy Dropbox hosting and integrate it with that maybe, and things like that. So I think there'll be an opportunity to kind of separate the functionality and the storage features. And I think more than likely we're going to start to see a shift in like what stuff I can do on my machine, what stuff I can do locally that doesn't really need to be on the cloud, but if I need to share it with somebody, then I can put it on some kind of shared kind of storage instead.
Interesting. Mubs, we can go on and on. It's been fun. We love jamming with each other, and I think it's the once movement, the ideas you drop, so interesting. I think probably like folks can learn one or two things, and again, the philosophy and the mindset you've kind of developed over time is quite inspirational as always. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I tell people is, you should just, I think I might have even said it to you at one point or other, but it's like, just start making projects, because you don't know which ones are going to succeed. You don't know which ones will be successful. But unless you try, you're not going to know. And absolutely, I think you asked me this in the conversation. I don't think I fully answered it. In terms of like, can you build stuff on, in nights and weekends while you have a full-time job? That's the best way to do it. Like, it de-risks everything. If you have a job that's paying your salary, it's taking care of the bills, taking care of your family, and you're just like experimenting with stuff in the weekends and evenings and things like that, that's the best way to do it, because you don't have to worry about, how do I pay the bills? How do I put food on the table? That's why you have a job for that. And then obviously once, if something works, if something gets traction, then you can make that shift if you want to, or you can, now there's lots of ways that you can take something that's successful with, things like acquire.com, where you can just list it and then you can make some money and then you can walk away from it and start your next side project as well. So that absolutely, there's you should have fun in nights and weekends, kind of working on these things. If it's something that you want to be your next thing, it can be. If it's just something you want to have a fun hobby with, that's absolutely fine too.
Yeah.
But start now, like, because what are you going to wait for? That's
Yeah.
actually gonna change it so it'll be successful. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But if you start it, then at least you have that opportunity.
Now is the best time. That's it. Today is your best time. Today is your best time to take a shot. On top of what you said, I think the biggest thing I learned doing side projects, working on these jobs, is you kind of develop a muscle, uh, which is really, really, like, game changer in my opinion, because you will end up having a time when you go all in and you'll be prepared. It's like before a Super Bowl. Now that we are in this, like, yesterday was Super Bowl. If you don't, it's like taking side building side projects is like lot like practice before you enter into a game, right? Like, if you don't throw, like, 1,000 shots, or if you don't catch 1,000 throws in the game, there is a high chance that you will either fumble, or you, like, there is a chance of interception, right? Like, you have to be ready for it. So the way you make yourself ready is by doing side projects in the night, if you ever want to, like, build your own thing. So that's what I've been doing with you, Mubs. Prep, be ready, be develop that thick skin. If it is, if it's a wild shot, and if it goes in, oh wow, it's going in, let's make it another one. Let's make another one in the right way. So I think that's the thing I'm chasing, and I feel hopefully, like, people acknowledge that, realize that, and they do the same. But appreciate you, Mubs, as always. Thank you so much for joining. That's a wrap, folks. Stay tuned. We have amazing guests on the pod. We do this for you guys to, like, share one or two lessons that we learned on the way, and hopefully, like, teeny tiny bit inspiration installed in you so that you can do your own thing. So stay tuned, but take it easy and keep shooting. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.